Welcome to the new Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news on the local Colorado economy and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host, Chris Gorog, brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. Chris is personable and opens up with our guests on issues we all would like to see addressed. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's new Cyber Frontier.
Hello, this is Abe Thompson here on the new Cyber Frontier from the SecureSet Studios here in Colorado Springs. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the distinct privilege today of having the Honorable Karen Evans, the Assistant Secretary of Energy for Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
It is definitely a delight to have you, and as we had a brief moment to chat before, I appreciate some of your background and experience and focus on workforce development and cybersecurity, and I look forward also just to kind of hearing some of the initiatives that have been important to you here in this position. And so if I might, ma'am, would you tell us a bit about how you ended up where you are and what some of your professional journey that's led you to have an emphasis on cybersecurity and other things there at DOE?
Well, I'm excited to be in this office. This is a newly formed office at the Department of Energy, and the acronym, so I'll start referring to myself as CSER. The Office of CSER.
That's excellent.
Yeah, it's a great acronym, and that's what they call us. So this is a newly formed office, but if we look at my personal journey going forward to this, is that cybersecurity and risk management have been a part of my IT development, my systems development since 1996. So in 1996, I was the first department to be hacked. Its website and my services were hacked at the Department of Justice, and that is an experience that most people should not have to live through. And it was new back in 1996, but those lessons learned have been part of everything that I have structured going forward, because it is always about risk management, about what you want to do, what services you want to provide, and how much risk you're willing to live with as you're deploying new technologies.
And I love that. And it's interesting, you talk about sort of 96 timeframe. In 97, as a young naval officer, I was working at NSA in the National Security Incident Response Center, and we actually did a lot of work with DOJ and FBI because we were still trying to get our handle around what cybercrime was and how we were going to address it. So those were interesting times in this industry for sure.
Oh, yes. Yes, I remember those. And when I would meet with the computer crime section at DOJ, I decided that I wasn't going to work in automation anymore after I would talk with them. But I had a service. I was in operations at that point.
Sure.
And we were to bring internet connectivity to everyone because the Attorney General wanted to send an email out to the entire employee base at DOJ.
Sure.
And the example that I give to everybody was, as an operational person, there was a whole bunch of people in the room. I said, well, what happens if somebody answers back? And that put the project back by 4 months, because all the legal and all the attorneys and everybody else had to say, okay, there's a records management issue, there is privacy issues, there was security issues associated with this. Do you really want the Attorney General having a dialogue with the employees? Maybe. And so there were a lot of policy issues associated with, well, what if one person replies back? And what happens if that person then hits reply all, and it goes back out to over 100,000 people?
Right.
And so they were like, what? And I'm like, yeah, see this little key? They can hit reply all, and it'll all go back out to everybody. Didn't she want that? She wanted to communicate with her employees, so we had to set up a mechanism where she could communicate with the employees, but it was mirroring things off of what people know about correspondence control and exec sec, and how do things get to the Attorney General, and are they getting those reviews? And do we have the right audit trails associated with those so that it looks like a dialogue, but that we're meeting all the federal requirements associated with it?
Wow, that has to go under great moments in cybersecurity history, because it's just so funny to think of that now, how archaic that seems, that the reply all button and all those things that we learned about the hard way as we kind of grew through this. I love that.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
It's kind of like, asking the right questions at the right time
Right.
versus asking question after the service is deployed.
The reactive, yes, the reactive.
We'll be with the rest of today's show right after these brief messages from our sponsors. Cyber Resilience Institute helps build strong cyber communities designed to prevent members from attack. Like building a neighborhood watch, it takes coordination and a sharing community to protect our identities and valuables in the virtual world. Typically, we hear that organizations know they need to do something to protect their cyber assets, but don't know where to begin. Let Cyber Resilience Institute help your community create an action plan. Cyber Resilience Institute will build your community or business marketplace so that it is designed to support a collective cyber defense. Contact them for more information at cyberresilienceinstitute.org.
So you are in this really neat, newly formed office inside of the Department of Energy. What is the role, particularly of the CSER, as we've called it here?
So we are responsible for the industry. We are the sector-specific agency under critical infrastructure. So we have multiple responsibilities as the department. So, for example, we have legislative responsibilities. When the FAST Act of 2015 went through, it specifically included cybersecurity as a responsibility as a sector-specific agency for DOE. We also then have things under the policy process, presidential directives, as a former NSA, or you are very familiar with those, that deal with the National Response Framework. So we have the lead for ESF 12. So we are all hazards. So from man-made to natural, we also have electronic magnetic pulse and geomagnetic disturbances.
Wow.
Because it's all of those types of interference that would happen and would disrupt power throughout the entire sector. So when you're looking at the sector, it's not just electricity, but the sector is dealing with oil and natural gas as well as downstream natural gas. And so now that you look at the United States as a whole, that we are energy independent, because we are energy independent, that has led to more complexities in relationships and interdependencies, and there's risks associated with those. So this office is focused on that partnership of how do we really work with private industry, because we don't own the infrastructure. The infrastructure is owned by private industry. So how do we meet those federal responsibilities while we're working with private industry and giving them enough information so that they can keep the power up?
Well, and that's global, that's business, that's interdisciplinary, that's intergovernmental agency. That's it's pretty diverse. I imagine that you folks probably don't get much sleep.
Well, we're always thinking about it, that's for sure.
I love it.
Because we track the weather, right?
Indeed.
So right now, one of the things that we're really focused on is what's happening in the Midwest as it relates to propane.
Yeah.
With this cold piece coming through, right, which is unusual. So we have to be looking at, and then you had a pipeline that is now back up with its full production, but that impacts what is happening in those Midwestern states, and then we're really working with them and our state partners, because this then relates to, because that's a regional issue, so we also work with the governor's offices, and we have state partners, so there are energy coordinators at the state offices that we work with. That's our role also from a sector-specific agency, to work with them from that state, local, and tribal government approach.
That's very diverse. It's interesting. I was talking a little bit to one of your staff members earlier, and I remembered how forward-leaning the Department of Energy was. In my earliest days in learning about cyber, some of the earliest training I got was actually put out by the Counterintelligence Office there at the DOE. So you were definitely on the forefront, and it's demonstrated in the diversity of issues you probably face every day. And kind of speaking of issues, what would you say is probably the biggest issue in front of you right now at the DOE?
As it relates to the office, it's probably multifaceted, which is this is a brand new office. So internally within the DOE, we're focused on making sure that the office is institutionalized within the existing processes of the department. Okay, so
I know what that's about.
one focus. The other focus that we're looking at is, okay, how do we make sure that we can get information out to all our industry partners, right? Not just, it's so we have sector coordinating councils and subsector coordinating councils that we have to work with, and so we're looking at how do we do that in a way that's really efficient. The other part that we also have, this gets back to your innovation of DOE, is that we have a research and development component. So how do we stay ahead to be looking 5 to 10 years down the road about what should the government be funding from a research and development piece as it affects this sector, so that we can deliver results and then it can get commercialized out to different parts of technology sectors, not just the energy sector, right? But like, for example, if you look at information technology, and we were talking about this earlier, a lot of those companies are pivoting to the energy sector.
Right.
So how do we get that analysis and those products focused in a way that our research can inform their product roadmap?
Sure. It's so as you have kind of marched through the institutionalizing the office, if I can just kind of ask a side question, is it being received well inside the department? Do you think that, or do you feel like folks are understanding the importance of cybersecurity being a priority across the board? Do you feel that's being received well?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And it's a leadership priority. The Secretary of Energy, Secretary Perry, established it, but
Excellent.
With all our leadership here, even with his departure, it's not going to make a difference, because cybersecurity and the response function that we do, regardless of the nature of the event, of how we work with the energy sector as a whole, that's a priority for the department. And so you see it manifest itself in multiple ways, like with the National Cybersecurity Strategy out from the administration. One of the main areas, one of the 7 areas is power, right, and generation of power. When you look at the work that we're doing within the government and then with industry that came from committees that recommend things directly to the president, the Tri-Sector Working Initiative came from that. And that came from the NIAC, which then said, hey, it should be power, finance, and telecom. Because when you have an incident, even at your own house, what do you look for first? You have to have power, then you look for communications, and then I have to have access to money. So you just can you can keep adding the circles around that, but as a nation, in order for us to continue to function, we have to have power, we have to have communications, and we have to have access to the global market.
And clear centers of gravity like those, it's good to know that people have actually landed on those things as the priorities. Internal to what your things going on in the office, what are you most excited about right now, cybersecurity specific, in things that your office is involved in?
Well, we're working very specifically on the analysis as it relates to operational technology, and we're looking at the nexus of information technology and operational technology. So we're very focused on those solutions that will then give us greater insight into what's happening within the energy sector as it relates to SCADA systems and industrial control systems. And so our work in that area, that's where we have landed there. We're very focused there because we feel like the market is very focused on the IT. So that work and the partnership that we have with our industry partners and the pilots that we've done, if they hadn't partnered with us, I don't believe that we would be advancing as quickly as we are, because of their willingness to work with us on these pilots. So that work And then the legal framework around that is very exciting in order for us to be able to leapfrog ahead to have that situational awareness across the sector.
Excellent.
We'll be with the rest of today's show right after these brief messages from our sponsors.
Murray Security Services are your cybersecurity experts with decades of experience providing professional training services for our clients in various industries. We offer professional training and certification in areas of cybersecurity, safety, health, and environmental services at our academy. Our in-person and online training provides a collaborative environment where students can interact directly with instructors through live chats or in private classrooms. Visit murraysecurityservices.com for more information.
Now, in terms of cooperation, I love hearing about these partnerships. How can, say, those out here, maybe hearing this in the listening audience that are maybe small business or whatever else, how can they best prepare to cooperate with some of these efforts so that they can contribute to the solution and success that you've had in some of these other areas?
So a lot of the small municipalities and those that are focused in the energy sector, we do a lot of work out with the ISACs, which are the information sharing groups.
Yeah, we just opened one here in town.
And many of them belong to associations.
Right.
And so we have a lot of partnerships with the associations, and we work through the associations to make sure that they have a cooperative agreement, for example, when we're talking about training for some of the solutions that we're moving forward. So we've taken on this principle about cost shouldn't be a barrier for you to have access to your information and
right.
to have analytics associated with that. And so as we're designing these solutions, we're really trying to design them for the least common denominator.
Sure.
And there'll be benefits that would go to like small businesses, to rural co-ops, to those. I mean, we really are very focused on how these solutions should be designed so that cost doesn't become prohibitive for them to be able to participate in the information sharing across. If they want to be involved in the pilots, they can actually just reach out directly to us from that perspective, because we're always looking for people to be involved in the pilot. I know a lot of the smaller groups also, if they're geographically located near a national lab, we leverage our national labs.
Sure.
We have 17 national labs across the board. A lot of them work directly with the national labs, which is another way that they are then partnered with us through that perspective as well. So there's multiple ways that they could work with us. They don't just have to come to DC, that there are regional things that they can do, which we would strongly encourage your listenership to do.
Yes. Well, and I love, and I've been very proud of Colorado Springs. We just launched a space ISAC here, with the sort of the space command movement, but also.
Yeah, so we're on the space council here.
I love it.
Woo-hoo!
I love it. So people are kind of getting, sort of getting this and making it a priority. And I've been really proud of the other things, like even our Chamber of Commerce, for instance, here in Colorado Springs, we have a cybersecurity director. So he's specifically involved in both the education space and in cybersecurity related businesses, and they've really made it a priority. Our mayor sits on the board of the National Cybersecurity Center here in Colorado Springs, and so I love hearing about your need to see municipalities that are rising to the surface, and definitely proud of our what used to be a little town here in the Springs.
Well, you know as well as I do that a lot of this is economic development,
Yes.
and that it has to start at the local level,
Yeah.
because we're as strong as our weakest link, right?
Hear, hear.
And so when you start looking across the board, especially in the cybersecurity place, but even with emergency response, and in the energy sector, just from a safety perspective, and then adding on cyber onto that, the way that the mutual assistance agreement already established for other things in the energy sector, and cyber just becomes another facet of the existing partnerships that are there.
Sure, and I hope it's integrated. We hope to see it integrated and not try to kind of piecemealed out, because really cybersecurity is everybody's problem, right?
Exactly.
And we're getting it. So specific to what you do there in the Caesar in terms of preparing for a cybersecurity incident, what are some of the things that you put in place and you drill and you train for and you practice for and you prep for cyber incidents?
So we do exercises, and we have the lead for the exercises. We also have training. So we have cyber strike training that we partner with our labs, and our labs actually execute that out on that training curriculum for us.
Excellent.
But we do exercises, and we participate in the exercises. We have our own exercises, and so a lot of times what we try to do on the exercises is build a natural disaster, but also have a cyber piece inject in it, because our biggest concern is that we are most vulnerable as a nation when a natural disaster is happening, and it's not hard to track what is going to happen with a hurricane, right? Like they can look at the maps the same way we can. And so this is why things like the risk management, supply chain risk management, how you deploy these services, and mutual aid and mutual assistance, how we work with industry becomes really critical. So we really exercise those in multiple ways. Next week, we're participating in Grid X, which is actually run by NERC. But because NERC is a big partner with us, we are actively participating in that. There's an owner-operators type of piece to it, and then there's an executive type of piece exercise associated with that. We will take lessons learned from that and crank that into our own exercises. We work with DoD, so there are like really big types of things where you probably already read about them at Plum Island up in New York, where we did a black start, where we like turned off all the equipment, and then we worked with owner-operators and us and DARPA about how do you do a black start.
Right.
So we exercise in multiple different scenarios, because that's really testing out your plan. What you don't want to do is test out your plan during an actual incident.
Absolutely. I got to attend a regional critical infrastructure cybersecurity exercise, and I was impressed at who came, because you had the medical sector, the mayor's office, the county, and of course all the critical infrastructure folks, related to the electrical power folks. Colorado Springs is a bit unique in that our city utility is a city entity, but so there's a little bit easier, in that facet. But it was neat to see everybody come out and recognize that they needed to be there. The medical sector was really big there, of course, because of critical infrastructure's impact on their operations, and so people are
and to your point, because of where you are. We also work with DoD because we have Defense Critical Energy infrastructure.
Sure.
And so a lot of our exercises cover multiple different dimensions. And so, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about all of my government partners like DoD and DHS. So
Excellent.
we participate in the DHS exercises as well. So they do the annual cyber storm types of things.
Sure.
Where they're testing that across the board, across the United States. So, the day doesn't go by that we are not interacting with either DoD, DHS, or both.
And I believe is it Miss Manfra over there at DHS that has some oversight on cybersecurity? Is that name ring a bell?
Yes.
She's
cybersecurity, but you also then, so we really work. We work at Director Krebs level a lot, because they also have the physical piece, which also has a cyber piece, which deals with Brian Harrell. And so he's participating in the Grid X, so like this Grid X exercise that we're talking about that's happening later on this week, there'll be multiple facets of DHS participating in that activity, because It crosses all of CISA as a whole.
Indeed. Well, ma'am, I know that your time is extremely precious, but I'd be remiss if I didn't kind of ask you to look forward for us a little bit. What do you expect from your particular experience, because you've lived this, breathed it? What do you think to be the biggest change in cybersecurity for the energy sector in the next 10 years?
Well, what we really want to do is, and this kind of gets to the discussion that we were having before you started to record of the cultural change, which
Sure.
I'm really excited about how the energy sector really looks at the cybersecurity and the risk management associated with
Sure.
it. But it's really changing the dynamic so that we're looking more toward detect and protect and then respond and recover. And so that gets to the ability to be able to have a resilient energy grid
Sure.
for the nation as a whole. So a lot of that is partnership with our Office of Electricity dealing with resiliency and modernization of the grid as well. So it's really changing the dynamic and the engineering associated with the energy sector as a whole. And we couldn't ask for better industry partners than those that we work with. Throughout the energy sector, oil and natural gas, downstream natural gas, electricity. And I think if you take a look at the risk management factors and critical factors that DHS has put out from the National Risk Management Center, you can see where they have like the management that deals with generation transmission. We're always about generation, transmission, and distribution. I think we really want to make sure that we can continue to embrace innovation
Sure.
while we're managing the risk.
Right, and I love, in the education space here, I mean, we don't let our students out the door unless they have been able to embrace the principles of RMF, the risk management framework of today, and even understand the history of how we've gotten to the RMF and NIST standards and implementation. I mean, we drill them even down to being able to name the instructions and the ISOs, and those things are so important. And so I appreciate that even at the very top of our government, you're putting emphasis there. Well, ma'am, I know your time is exceedingly precious, and I know your staff would get after me if we just kept going, which I'd love to do, but I understand the time is pressing in, and I just can't tell you enough what a delight it's been to chat with you, and I can tell you're a kindred spirit in the cybersecurity space and in this space, and so I definitely look forward to future conversations with you. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed it today.
It has been our pleasure here on the New Cyber Frontier to have the Assistant Secretary of Energy for Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response, the Honorable Karen Evans. Thank you so much. This is Abe Thompson here at the SecureSet Studios in Colorado Springs on the New Cyber Frontier. Good day.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember, please follow and participate as New Cyber Frontier is supporting a grassroots community effort to empower the individual in the digital age. Check it out at privacyforthepeople.org. Also, make sure to join our mailing list so we can keep you informed. If you have an idea, if you have a question you would like to hear answered, or if you just want to get involved in what we're doing, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors links because they are the ones that really make this show possible. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.